Now in the effects submodule, we're going to have the ability to do things like post-crop vignetting, grain, and then the last tool is dehaze. And I'll talk about these individually, but let's start with post-crop vignetting. Now this is for situations where you want to specifically add vignetting to your images. So if you have an image and maybe you want to focus the attention on the subject, maybe you have a portrait and you do not want all the junk in the size of the image or maybe corners of the frame to be that highlighted to the viewer's eye, what you can do is add that vignetting in here. And there's two ways that you can do it. As earlier I showed you how you can do through lens corrections, and that's going to apply a very subtle change. But if you want to go crazy and apply a lot of vignetting, this is where you do it from. So if I take this amount, and this is the amount of vignetting that is going to be added to the image, and I slide it all the way to the left, as you can see, wow, look at that. It just made the edges crazy dark. And if I'm going to go in the opposite direction, it just made them super white. I really don't know why you would do this. You would normally go to the left side and try to kind of focus away from the edges of the frame. So if you want to do that, this is the amount that you apply. Maybe for this image, I'm just going to go really subtle, somewhere like around maybe 10 or 13. And then midpoint allows you to select the midpoint for the crop. So let me actually scale this back to be a bit more aggressive. And if I take the midpoint and start moving it, as you can see, it's toning down even closer to the center of the image. And if I go back all the way, then it's going to keep that vignetting just in the edges of the frame. So typically I use it right around the 50, which is a default value. But if you see that it's doing a little bit too much, you can actually move it towards the edges or bring it back if you want a smoother transition. Next, we've got roundness, and roundness defines the shape. So to see this better, I'm going to actually increase the amount more. At 100, it's going to be really round, and as I start changing it, as you can see, it goes to that, and now it's pushing towards the edges of the frame. So really, I don't know why anybody would apply this kind of vignetting to an image, but you have the option to do so. I'm going to scale it back to 0, which is the default. So feather is something that we can also play with. And if I start going to the left side, as you can see, it's pretty clear what feathering does. It now takes that really smooth effect and then it focuses it down to a particular area. Again, I don't know why anybody would do this. If you're going to go all the way to the right, then it's going to feather it as much as possible. So I'm going to return this back to, I think it was 50 is the default. Next, we've got highlights. And if I'm going to play with the highlights, as you can see, it's kind of a weird effect because it's going to play with highlights. So I don't know why I would use this as well. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And before I go to grain, let me actually show you one more thing. You've got 3 drop downs and you have by default highlight priority, then you've got color priority and paint overlay. Now, I'll be honest with you, I really don't know why anybody would pick any of these, but let me just show you the difference between them. So highlight priority is the default, but if I click on color, I think it's trying to restore some of that color in the vignetting. And then if you click on here and pick paint, it's just removing a lot of the contrast from that top and the bottom. So I really don't know why anybody would use these. The default is highlight priority, and that's what I use, and that's what I would recommend. Now, one more thing to point out is this particular tool is called post-crop vignetting. And the reason why is because, as the name suggests, whatever crop you apply to an image, it's going to apply vignetting after the cropping. So if I take this particular image and I say, you know what, I do want to crop this image, and if I'm going to bring this down, and that's my crop, as soon as I apply that, look at that. The cropping did not change vignetting, and vignetting actually got applied after I cropped the image. Now, one important difference here is that if I go back to my original image and say I actually went back to 0 here and removed any sort of vignetting, if I come back here into my lens corrections and if I apply a manual lens vignetting, let's say I go maybe a bit too bright, and now if I apply crop to the image, look at the difference. It did not do anything to the edges. So this is the important difference worth pointing out, is that if you're going to apply lens vignetting through the lens correction module, and then you're going to apply cropping afterwards, whatever you did here is really not going to carry over. So I'm going to go ahead and undo, those changes, but that's important to know. So I'm going to maybe just set something like -20, just very subtle vignetting effect here. And let's now move down to grain. Now in grain, this is another thing that I would personally never use, but if you wanted to try to simulate the effect of a film, this is where you do it from. So let's give it a try. I'm going to actually go ahead and zoom in so we can see this effect in detail. And if I start moving the slider and go to the right, as you can see, as I move to the right, it just completely destroyed my image. I'm going to try to tone this down a little bit because that looks really horrible. But once you go to the grain, then you can also apply size of grain, and this makes things even more horrific, as I can show you here. If I start moving this to the right and go big on it, now it's just a number of big blotches all over the image. So if you want to completely exterminate your image, this is where you do it from. I don't know why you would ever do that, but hey, sometimes people like these kind of things. And I think it also, I don't know if it's just rendering it this way, but I think it made the image look softer too. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel all of this. All right, so those are the tools there. And one more thing that we've got here is dehaze. So let me show you what this does. If you have an image that has some haze, this tool can actually help remove that haze. So as you can see in the mountains here in the back, we actually do see some haze. And if I said, you know what, let me try to reduce that haze, and I grab the slider, if I'm going to move to the right, as you can see, it's doing the removal. But at the same time, as you can notice, it's actually affecting the entire image. So if I'm going to go too crazy on the slider, let's say if I'm going to go to 100, that is just an insane looking image. I don't know if I would ever do this, but if you have a particular image, maybe you shot something and it has a lot of haze, just applying some subtle haze reduction might help. Now we're going to come down to camera calibration. Now the camera calibration submodule in Lightroom is a pretty important one, so let me explain why. Now, first of all, when I edit images, as you will see later on in the case studies, I actually start here when I start developing images. And the reason why I do this is because there's one important thing right here, and it's called profile. This is the camera profile. One thing is when you import images into Lightroom, you'll notice that when you take a picture with your camera, and say you select a particular camera setting, for example, something like a vivid or maybe a standard profile. When you take a picture, the image that comes out of the back of the LCD is going to have a particular look. And when you take pictures, you'll get used to seeing that look. And a lot of people get frustrated when they shoot in RAW because when they import their images into Lightroom, all of a sudden they see something completely different from what they're used to seeing on the back of their camera. So what it's going to do is when it imports the raw image, it's going to apply its own camera profile. The default camera profile is going to be Adobe Standard. Now, if I click on here, you can see there are all kinds of different profiles. For the most part, you're going to see something similar to here. You're going to see Adobe Standard, which is the default, as I said, and then you're going to have other settings depending on the camera that you shoot with. These are going to vary. So for Nikon, in this case, I've got camera flat, landscape, monochrome, neutral, portrait, standard, and vivid. And these are going to pretty much match, or at least be fairly close enough to what you would pick inside the camera. So if you go through the camera settings, as you can see in this menu right here, you've got flat and all these different camera profiles you can apply. So say you shoot in standard mode, which is typically what I choose when I shoot with my Nikons. Clicking on camera standard, this is a drastic change from what it was before to now. So it's trying to replicate that look. And for me, the reason why I start in this particular module is because before I make any sort of adjustments to the images, I want to have that starting look. And if I do this, then it's going to impact the rest of the processing pretty significantly. Now, do I want to do this at the end of editing? Definitely not, because now, for me, this is way too saturated and too much contrast to the image has been applied. If I go ahead and undo that, you can see how big of a change just switching the camera profile is going to carry. So this is something you have to keep in mind. And if you are going to come down here and make any changes, you might want to do this actually before you do any changes to the image. So for me, this is kind of a later point of editing game, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to standard. But just to give you an idea, as I'll show later in case studies, the first thing I do is apply this, and then I start top to bottom applying changes to images. Now there are a few other settings that we have here which you can actually play with, and in some cases they can give you interesting results. So let's go ahead and switch back to Adobe Standard to how we had the image before, and you've got a few options here. So you've got tint, red primary, green primary, and blue primary. And you have the control over hue and saturation. Now you might think, what is the difference between the options here and between the HSL options that we showed earlier? Well, the difference here is that this is trying to calibrate the look of the image without actually going into those specific settings. So if you change anything here, this is going to be on top of all the settings and changes you made before. For example, if I say, you know what, I want to change my red primary hue, and if I start messing with that, look at how much it changes the image. So it just made it almost like really magenta. And here, if I move it over to the right, now it's really yellow. So you gotta be really careful, and in many cases, you actually do not want to mess with these. Another thing you can do, and the reason why I have other options in here, is that you can actually use specific tools to try to replicate the color as accurately as possible for your specific camera. And this is something that is possible through specific calibration utilities. You can use a tool from, for example, X-Rite, and it's called a color checker, where you take a picture of different colors, and then you can use the software to try to approximate what the colors are supposed to look like, and you can create your own profile. Now, some people do this. I personally don't do it because I can see the colors and I can work with them. I know where my starting point is, but for some color critical work, if you are into studio photography, portrait photography, you might want to play with that, and maybe you will get some better results by using third-party tools. So keep that in mind. That's why this is really important. For some people, this is going to be, again, the starting point, just like for me, and then others will be creating their own profile. So, but one thing that I did want to point out is that when I edit my landscape images, I find that in the blue primary, if I use the saturation slider and if I make some changes to it, it can actually give the additional pop that sometimes can look kind of neat. So for this image, let's just give it another 20. So if I'm going to take this image and let's just try undoing and just redoing, as you can see, it's a very subtle change, but it's actually affecting all of the colors. It's not just touching the blues, it's enhancing the blues, but it's also taking all of these colors and giving them slight boost. So I don't go crazy on this setting. I'll go maybe maximum 20, 30 sometimes, depending on what I'm working with, but give it a try. It might be kind of a cool effect to try. So anyway, that's basically it when it comes to camera calibration. We have two additional buttons here on the bottom of the develop module, and those are previous and reset. I'm gonna start with reset because that one is super simple to explain. All it does, it reverts everything to default. So if I click on that, as you can see, everything went back to 0. So if you wanted to start over, this is where you would come and press that button. Now the previous button works very differently compared to reset, and you gotta be careful with this one because if you accidentally click on it and things go crazy on your image, that means that you actually pasted settings from a completely different image, not the current one you're working on. Now this can actually be useful. So if I'm gonna go back to the grid and say, well, maybe I can take everything that I've done to this image and paste it to this image, if I'm gonna go to the develop module and then click on that previous button, what it's going to do, as you can see, all these settings like saturation, dehaze, and everything else that I've done to the image just got pasted into this image. So in a way, it can be pretty useful. Now, one more thing to point out is that it doesn't mean that it only uses the previous image. If I go to something like this, which is from a different sequence, and if I click on the previous button, as you can see, it applies the same settings from the last image that I worked on. So this is something you want to keep in mind, that you can actually select a completely different image, and it's the last image that you worked on that is going to grab the settings from. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo what I've done here because I do not want those settings to be pasted. I'm going to leave it there. Now let's talk about one of the most useful features in Lightroom, which is the ability to copy paste settings from one image to another. And this is something that comes incredibly useful in some situations where, for example, in this case, I've got these 4 images from the same sequence. And maybe you were doing a portrait edit where you actually took pictures in exactly the same light and you edited one image and now you're satisfied with the results and you just want that same setting to be applied to multiple images. You can easily do that in Lightroom. Let me show you how. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this first image. This is a sequence of panorama that I shot in Death Valley, and let's just make some very quick tweaks so that I can show you what this does. So it looks like I already had a little bit of clarity applied. I'm just going to tweak maybe just the exposure a little bit. Actually, the white balance is somewhere where I want to start because this looks way too blue. So maybe just adjust the white balance just so that that white looks a little bit more white. And then what I'm going to do, maybe just play with a little bit with highlights. Looks like just reduce them just a little bit. And then play with the shadows here. Just reduce the shadows. That looks overly bright to me. Not anything crazy. All I want to do at this point, let's just say I've done all these edits to the image. All I want to do is copy paste settings from this image to these other images. How do I do that? Now, if I right click on the image, you're going to have all these different options. And I'll come back to these in a second, but one of the things that I use the most is right here, develop settings. And I have these different options here, but I'm going to start with copy settings. What I can do is say copy settings, and I have all these other options that I can pick. Now I could say, you know what, I'm only going to pick white balance and just the basic tone adjustments, which includes all these exposure, contrast, and other stuff that we talked about before. Or I could say, you know what, I'm going to check everything. Because in this case, maybe I just want to carry all the changes over from that first image to the other images. So all I have to do from here is copy, and then if I select multiple images by just clicking on the first image, holding shift, and then selecting the last image, that selects the group of images. From here, I can do the same thing by right-clicking and then going to develop settings and paste. So this works similar to what you would do in something like Microsoft Word, where you're just copying a word or a paragraph and pasting it to another document. So if I click paste settings, as you can see, everything just got changed. And it might take a little bit for the thumbnails to get re-rendered, but as you can see, the change got applied to all these images. Now, if you find this particular method a bit cumbersome, what you could do, there are 2 buttons right here in the grid. So what I could do is I could say, now go ahead and sync the settings. And if I do that, it brings this window up, which is very similar to what you saw earlier. And I could say, check all this stuff, or maybe selectively something. And then if I click on synchronize, essentially it does the same thing. It knows that this is the edited image and these are the non-edited images, and it's going to apply the settings to all those images at once. So 2 ways to do it here. So far we mentioned that keyboard shortcuts can save you a lot of time in Lightroom, and this is one of those things that you can use the keyboard shortcuts for as well. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the last change, and if I select the source image and I hit Command-Shift-C on a Mac or Control-Shift-C on a PC, this window comes up and I can select these different options, or in this case I'm just going to check everything and copy. And then what you can do to be able to paste everything into a group of images, I again select the group of images, and then the shortcut for that is Command-Shift-V on a Mac or Control-Shift-V on a PC. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and as you can see, all the changes got applied to these images. Now earlier I showed you what the right-click menu looks like, so let's get back to it and do a quick overview. So here we have a bunch of settings. Now all of these settings are accessible through the menu, but some things are going to be pretty useful for you to be able to quickly jump to just by right-clicking on a particular image. So things like set flag, rating, color label we talked about, which you can quickly access from here, but other things like edit in and Photoshop, if you wanted to bring those images to Photoshop, for example, you have to go to photo and find that and click there. So instead of doing all of that, you could save yourself time, right click on an image or a group of images and do selective work on it. So one thing that I did want to point out is that from here, I do have access to things that I access quite a bit. Now we have these images selected right now, and one thing that I could do to them, I could say, well, let's try to use Lightroom's built-in capability to build a panorama. So what I could do is I could select all these images, and then I already have them selected. I could just right-click on any of these images, in fact, and I could say photo merge, and I'm going to merge them into a panorama. Now, this is a really cool feature, and I really love this capability here because Lightroom by default is going to use a DNG format. So DNG being a non-destructive format allows me to go into the image once it's already stitched and make all these edits that it can do normally in raw images only. So let's go ahead and stitch this panorama, and you've got a couple of options here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them because it depends on the type of panorama that you shoot, but basically you've got spherical, cylindrical, and perspective. Just play with these, figure out which one is going to work the best for the type of the panorama that you're working on. I'm just going to click on spherical and use that. Another option that I have here is autocrop. So what that does is if I uncheck that, as you can see, once it's done stitching, it's actually going to leave that white space around my panorama, which I do not want. And that's why if I click that, it will automatically apply a crop and remove it. So next we've got the boundary warp. Now, if I'm actually going to go back and uncheck this, what I could do is I could use the warp feature, which is going to take that image and try to stretch it until all of those areas, white areas, are gone. And as you can see, towards 100, and once I reach 100, it basically takes that image and it stretches all the way. Now, for this particular image, it might be an okay setting, but if you have some certain lines that you're working with, maybe some straight lines, it might actually start curving them towards the corners. So in this case, it might actually work pretty well, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring this back to 0 and just apply a simple crop. So let's go ahead and merge that. And it's going to take some time to do this because now it's taking 5 images, and these are again raw images, and it's then applying the chosen settings that I have to the panorama, and using its own algorithm, it's stitching that into a single image. And as you will see shortly, it's going to end up creating one DNG image. All right, now the panorama got built pretty quickly, and as you can see, it's a single image DNG, and it's looking nice. I'm gonna go ahead and go into the develop module, and as you can see here, this being a DNG format, I can make the same edits as I could on a raw image. And in fact, some of the settings that I had in my images got carried over, like clarity 15 and other settings that I had. So if I scroll down here, you can see that even my camera profile is in there. So this is really cool because now I can make all the edits to this one single panorama, and all those edits are going to apply as just as if this was a raw image. So this is a very powerful feature that most other panorama stitching software solutions are not going to be able to offer. Most of the time, at least before Lightroom, you used to have to deal with different format changes. In many cases, you had to change your raw image to a TIFF format, then stitch the image, or maybe the software can automatically read the raw format, then it would create a TIFF file, so you cannot really go back and make changes to it. So keep this in mind, really cool feature in Lightroom. Now that the panorama is created, let's talk about another great feature that's built right into Lightroom, and that's HDR. Now, what is HDR? If you've never heard of the term, it basically stands for high dynamic range. And if you photograph a very dynamic scene, for example, sunrise or sunset, where you have a lot of brights and a lot of darks, then what you can do is, if your camera cannot capture that entire scene in a single shot, maybe it doesn't have enough dynamic range to be able to do so, you could capture the scene with multiple exposures, and you could use, for example, 3 exposures, one specifically underexposed so that you can have all the information in the sky preserved, then maybe one regular exposure where you're capturing the midtones, and then one overexposed image where you're specifically aiming for the shadow or dark areas of the scene. Now, what you could do is you could take those 3 or more images to then have the software combine all of that information into a single image. And Lightroom has the built-in capability to do so. So right here, I've got 3 images, and let's try to merge them into a single HDR. Now, the reason why this is a good candidate is because these images are actually shot at different exposure values specifically for that reason. Now, before we actually make changes to these 3 images, so what I need to do is, before I start doing this, I want to reset them to defaults, because this is the image that we actually specifically darkened earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and right click and go to develop settings, and I'm going to reset. Now, we're going to lose all the changes that we made to this and this image, but it's okay, because the point here is we're going to just experiment with HDR. Now, this is the mid-exposure, this is the underexposed area specifically for the sky, and then this is the overexposed image that I specifically use to have all this information in the foreground preserved. So all we have to do is right-click by selecting all these three images and then going to Photo Merge and HDR. Now, this is going to bring up the HDR merge preview. And as you can see right now, it's generating the HDR preview for me. And as you can see, it's actually a pretty decent merge right there by default. And there are a couple of options to cover here. I've got auto align, auto tone, and then a few other things like deghost amount. Now, I'm not going to cover these in detail because you can explore these on your own, and it will really depend on the type of image you're working with. But here, I'm just going to use the defaults. And if I go ahead and click merge, what it's doing right now is combining all those three images into a single image. Now, as you can see, we have one more image here, and it is again in DNG format, which means that it took three raw images and created basically another raw image for me. If I double click on this image, I have the ability, and then press D to go into the develop module, I have the ability to actually now edit it just like before as a raw image, which is really great because all of these sliders and settings are going to be something that I can pick from. So maybe I want to start with a profile, select camera standard, and as you can see, that changes the image right there. And then another thing is when the HDR merge happens, Lightroom is going to apply some settings. And as you can see, I have things like highlights already set to -100, the shadows are boosted up, the whites and the blacks are changed. So if you don't like those, you can actually change them. So in this case, it looks overly bright for me. I'm gonna go ahead and set exposure to 0. Unfortunately, I cannot push highlights more because it's already set to -100. And then if I don't like any of these settings, I can work with it. But as you can see, judging just by how this image looks already, look at the sky. It looks fully preserved. In fact, if I look at the histogram, I really have nothing lost. The foreground looks amazing. All the shadow details are there for me to work with. The sky looks beautiful, and then the background here looks great. So if I compare that and this image, for example, and I'll just simply select both of these, press D, and just show you this is the first image that it used, and then this is the actual merged HDR. Now, I could try to recover some things like before, and in fact, let's just do a quick comparison here. I'm going to go back to the setting that I had there, and this is the final edited image that I had, and just compare that to the HDR. This is barely edited right now. I don't have any sharpening or anything else applied, and as you can see, that's actually a pretty good starting point. I've got all the blues preserved, all the information is there. That's just a great way for me to do something like HDR on a set like this. So just keep this in mind. If you've never tried an HDR technique, you'll be surprised by the results you can get in Lightroom compared to most other software packages. Now that we talked about the Lightroom features like Panorama and HDR, let's talk about a few other things that we haven't talked about yet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an image, maybe even this one, and let's say if I go to Develop Module, what if I wanted to have some changes to the image done, and then maybe have the quick way to access the changes and preserve different versions of it. Now, we talked about the history panel here, and as you can see, it's a quick way for me. If I start toggling, just hovering the mouse, it will show me on the top right here how the image looked before. And if I can definitely jump in between these steps, which is really powerful because I can go back to my previous steps. But what if I wanted to make some changes to the image and maybe experiment with other changes and then compare those two? Unfortunately, this is kind of a single level tree, which I cannot expand to multiple subtrees. But what I can do is I can create a snapshot. And this is something really cool because right now there's nothing in here because I never created the snapshot. But let's just say I'm going to start right here on this image, and then I'm going to create a snapshot. Now, snapshot is going to take what I've got here. And as you can see, as soon as I click that, it says, what's the snapshot name? And it can either put the date and time by default, or I can type whatever I want. So let's just say portrait 1. Now, if I click create, it will create a snapshot called portrait 1. Now what I could do is I could say, all right, well, now is the time to play with other settings. So I'm going to go and play with highlight, maybe just, boost up the shadows a little bit, whatever I want to do to the image. And let's just do something drastic. And I'm going to go crazy on vibrance, make her look really terrible here, but just for comparison's sake. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create another snapshot, and I'm going to call it portrait 2. And if I create that second snapshot, now I could actually go back and change the settings, maybe even reset this to default and start playing with something completely different. At this point, I've got one version right here, which is basically reset to default, and then I have these 2 moments of time that I froze. So if I click on portrait 1, it applies the first snapshot, which had all the settings that I had before with the crop looks like and maybe some leveling here. And then the second one is where I completely killed the picture and applied crazy 64 saturation. So this is something that can be really useful if you're working with an image and you want to try different looks to an image and you do not want to mess with its history too much, and maybe you want to just do some comparisons. You could definitely try different edits and preserve them as snapshots. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and select the first one. And by the way, if you wanted to get rid of something crazy like this, all you have to do is hit minus and that snapshot is gone. So let's go ahead and go back to the grid. Now, another thing you can do, instead of creating a snapshot which applies to a single image and you can only see within the develop module, you can actually create something called a virtual copy. Now, a virtual copy is a really cool feature because I'm going to go ahead and create one. I'll show you what it looks like. A virtual copy, as the name suggests, is a copy of the image, but it's virtual, which means that right now I can see 2 images. They look identical, but this one is very different from this one. And the difference is very drastic compared to something like a file copy operation in your operating system. Because when you do that, you're going to end up with multiple duplicate files. In this case, what it's doing is it's simply creating a reference within the Lightroom database that says, it's the same image, but I'm going to simulate a copy of that exact same image. So everything is referenced back to the original single raw file. And if you look at this new virtual copy, the difference is you're going to see this flip of a page on the side of it, which indicates that it is a virtual copy. Now, why are virtual copies powerful? If I wanted to create one look in this image and then have a completely different look in this image, and if I wanted to toggle between 2 kind of separate images, I can do that here. So let's give this a try. So this is my original image, and say I'm satisfied with this look, but I wanted to compare that look to maybe something that has black and white. Let's go ahead and do a quick conversion. I'm just going to hit black and white here. Now I have 2 looks that I can compare. So if I press enter and if I toggle between these 2, you can see now it's jumping between 2 different images, and it also treats them like they're 2 different images. Now, another thing that is worth pointing out is that if we compare the virtual copy, it does preserve the snapshots. So the snapshots that I had before, if I actually click on that, now I can get back to the snapshots that I created in the earlier image. However, one thing that does not get carried over is the history. As you can see, the last action that I have here is create virtual copy, and then the next action is convert to black and white. So while it does copy the snapshots, it's important to point out that it does not carry over any of the history. So things like the cropping are already applied, but I don't see them here. So if I hit the R key that brings up the cropping here, you can see that the image is already cropped, but it's not visible in the history panel. Now, if I go back to the grid and show you one more thing, so you can literally create as many virtual copies of the image as you want, and your space is not going to change on your hard drive. So if I said, you know what, let's just create a couple of more of these, you can, like I said, do as many copies of these virtual copies as you want. So just keep this in mind if you have an image that you want to make maybe in different versions. Maybe you're a wedding photographer and you have a client that's requesting an image in regular color and black and white. When you select these versions, you could right click and you can export it's going to actually export these as two separate files. Now, this is probably one of the most useful features that you might not know about because it's actually treating them separately. Whereas with snapshots, you would have to create a snapshot, export that version, then create another snapshot, then export that separately. So it does make that process much simpler and easier. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you create a virtual copy, as I did here, Lightroom automatically knows that they're part of the same original image, which is this one. So what it's going to do, it's automatically going to create a stack. And let me talk about stacking now. So in this case, I am in the quick collection view here, so it's not going to let me view the stacking options. In fact, if I right click an image, by default, I should be able to see the stacking option here, but unfortunately in quick collection, there is no capability there. So I have to click on my photos folder. And now, as you can see, as soon as I got there, now it says 104, 204, 304, and 404. What that means is that these images are part of one stack. Now, if I click here, if I say, you know what, I'm going to right click here, go to stacking, and I've got these options here, but one of the things that I could do is I could say collapse stack. And the moment I do that, those four images basically become one like this. It's still showing me that I have four images inside, so I could expand that stack and look at what I've got there. But the nice thing about this is that despite the fact that I have those virtual copies, they're not taking up real estate here in the grid view. So that's a really neat feature, and this is something you can actually do to a group of images. So for example, if I went back to my quick collection and I said, all right, well, I'm gonna pick these three images, so this one, and this one, they're part of the same stack, and maybe keep HDR separately. What I could do is, although they're not virtual copies, I could go back to photos and still they're selected. And in this case, I could say right click and go to stacking and group them into a stack. And as you see, the moment I do that, it removed those other images and merged them all into a single stack with three images. Now that's really cool because if you have images, and if I shoot panoramas, for example, where I have many images that I could then group together, they will not take so much space in my grid view. Now, one other great feature that Lightroom has that relates to stacking is the ability to automatically stack images for you. And the reason why this can be actually very useful is if you have a lot of images and you shoot things like HDRs and panoramas, you can combine them into a single stack without having to go through all these groups and doing the stacking manually. So what I could do is I could say, okay, well, let's select all of these images. And I'm going to do that by hitting Control A or Command A in Mac. And I could say, all right, so I know that normally I'm probably not going to be shooting images very closely together. So let's try to play with this real quick. I'm going to right click and say stacking. And I've got an option right here that says auto stack by capture time. Let's take a look at what this is going to do. So right now I have a time between stacks set to 3 seconds. By default, I think it was something like a minute. Let's just play with this a little bit. So if I define the stack, as you can see, if I start increasing that, it's going to create more stacks. So if I go crazy and apply this to maybe like 1 hour apart, it's going to create a total of 48 stacks. And that's a lot. So it's going to group too many images together. So let's just do like 12 seconds here. It says 30 stacks. Let's try this real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and click stack. And as you can see, these images didn't get stacked. But what happens if I look at this image right here? Well, it says it's one of two. So it did stack these two images together because they were taken at a very close time frame. But let's take a look at the images of the panoramas that I had before. So if I click on one of these and then go back to photos, as you can see, it's now part of that stack. So if I right click and say stacking and go ahead and collapse stack, as you can see, those 6 images that I had, and there were 5 in my quick collection, but I had a total of 6 there, it combined them all into a single stack. So if you want to do this for your images and you want to be able to do this quickly, you can achieve that directly from this window. But keep in mind that if you have images that were shot close together in terms of time, but maybe they're completely different images, this technique will still stack them. So the usefulness of it really depends on what you do. Speaking of stacking, there's another cool feature built into Lightroom that allows you to stack submodules together and view them one at a time. Let me show you how this works. So this actually works in any module, but I'm going to click on an image and go to Develop module. Now here, if I right click on this top panel, this is going to come up, and this allows me to pick any of these panels that I want to work with. And then if I go to solo mode, by picking that, as you can see, everything just got collapsed and only the one that I was working on is expanded. Now, this is really cool because if I don't want to see everything and I know all these modules, if I click on detail now, everything else just got collapsed and I only have detail. So if you do not want to deal with clutter, it will allow you to go to one submodule at a time, which will potentially save you from going and dragging your mouse up and down and trying to scroll through things. Now, if I go back here and uncheck solo mode, another thing you could do is only expand the ones that you work with manually. So if I work with basic and then I want to work with detail, I could only expand those and then the rest of them remain collapsed. And this is something that Lightroom will actually remember. So if I quit Lightroom and reopen Lightroom, I do not have to redo this again. Now, one more thing that I haven't shown you yet. Earlier, when I right click, I said I can check and uncheck these. What do these do is if you actually have a submodule that you don't care about, for example, if I said, you know what, I do not care about the tone curve, if I just click on that and that unchecks it, it completely removes it from this view. So if we take a look, that's gone. So if there are particular submodules that you prefer working with and you want to remove the rest, all you have to do is right click on any of these panels. And this, by the way, is accessible not just through basic here. I could click on any of these panels and have access to that same menu here. So if I do something like detail, for example, now detail is gone. So keep this in mind. The interface is somewhat customizable and allows you to see things that you need to see. And then by default, if you want to see everything, then obviously all of these things are going to be available. Now, lastly, keep in mind that you can also right click here and just have everything expanded, or you could just right click and collapse everything, which allows you to just take everything and stack it into just one single view like this. By now, we've covered the editing capabilities of Lightroom pretty extensively, and hopefully you should be able to apply that knowledge while editing your images. But there's one area that we have not touched yet, which is presets. And this is something that can potentially save you quite a bit of time. Let's talk about presets now. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to my quick collection because there are some images that we edited. So let's go ahead and pick this particular image because that's the one that we edited extensively earlier. And if I jump to the develop module, I can see that I've done all these different edits to the image. Now, what if I really liked the look of this image and I wanted to replicate this in the future? Maybe apply it to completely different images. What I could do is I could create a preset. On the left side here, you have presets. If I expand that, these are all the different presets that I have available in my computer. Now, don't worry about all of those, and what I'm going to do is just create a new one by hitting this plus icon there. And it allows me basically to specify a name, so in this case, I'm just going to call it landscape. And I'm going to save it to user presets, but here is where I can actually select what to apply when this preset is selected. And this is something important because in this particular image, I do have certain things that we applied earlier. For example, I have all these tone adjustments and other things, but there are things specific to this particular image which I might not want to carry over. Now, for this particular image, I know that I might not want the same post-crop vignetting and dehaze settings to be carried over to other images. So if I uncheck that, none of these things will come through. But another thing to keep in mind is that if you have certain things like graduated filters and radial filters that apply to certain parts of the image, when you create a preset and you have those checked, it's going to apply those same graduate filters and other things that are in this image to other images. And obviously, if it's a completely different image, then it's not going to look good because maybe I don't even have the sky for the graduate filter. So one thing to keep in mind is that if I have these selected and say I already edited an image and I had a few things that I applied to it, if I have everything checked here, it's going to reset that other image that I'm applying the preset to. So, for example, if I have an image where I actually did apply graduated filters, even if I don't have graduated filters in this image, as long as this field is checked, it's going to completely overwrite and reset the graduated filters on an image that already had it. So that's something important that you need to keep in mind. So as you use these tools, if there are things you do not want to overwrite, you might want to uncheck them from this list. So for me, in this case, I'm definitely not interested in carrying over my vignetting settings. And you know what? Even though I don't have anything in graduated and radial filters applied to this image, I'm actually going to go ahead and uncheck them. Another thing is white balance. You know, white balance is a very image specific setting. Why would I want to carry that over? So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. And although it's set to as shot, which means that it's going to carry it over to other images as shot, typically this is not something you want to select. But other settings might be just perfectly fine. Let's just make sure, noise reduction, calibration. So everything else looks good. So let's go ahead and create this preset now. I'm going to go ahead and create that. And as you can see on the bottom under user presets, now I have landscape. Now, I'm going to jump back to my grid view. Once your preset is selected, you can now apply it to one or many images at a time. So let's go ahead and give that a try. I'm going to select a bunch of images, maybe these 5 images right here. And as you remember, you can do this from multiple places. So I can just click on it. It gives me the ability to go into the user presets, and I've got my landscape. Now, if I go ahead and click on that, it's just taking pretty much everything that I had from this image and applying to this. And let's just go ahead and check real quick what it did. So if I hit the develop module, as you can see, it did not change the white balance, which I previously had set to custom. That, as you can see, did not change, but highlights, shadows, and all these other settings that I applied to that other image are in here. And let's check if that post-crop vignetting is here. And as you can see, nothing has been touched. So this is something really cool because now I have this one look. I know the settings in there work for that one image. And in fact, in this particular image and the set of images, it worked out really well. So in this case, you know what? I do have this one image, and let's go ahead and try this preset on that as well, because that's actually now a stitched panorama. And look at that, it just changed the look of the image. So if we look at the before, which I can access by just going to the history panel here, and look at that. This is something that, again, is going to save you a lot of time, and it's a great feature to use. Now, while I only have one preset that I created so far, I could create as many as I want. And as you use Lightroom more and more, you'll find yourself creating more presets that will save you time. Now, let's jump into something that I call a real time saver, because this is something that I use every single time. I might not rely on presets for all my images, but I do rely on this one quite a bit. And this is something that you can use during importing of your images. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to grid view, and let's go ahead and pick an image that we can then use as an import preset. I'm going to go ahead and just pick this image that we worked on previously. And while we had all those settings that we worked on, I'm going to go ahead and reset that because I already have it as a preset anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the develop module. And as I said before, I typically start from the bottom here from camera calibration. So I'm going to go ahead and now pick the settings. Now I shoot with a number of different cameras, and depending on what camera I use, I might need to change this. But for my Nikon cameras, I'm going to have camera standard. So I'm going to pick that profile. And next we're going to move up. I'm not going to touch any of these settings here, but I'm going to move up, and I'm not going to touch anything here with vignetting and dehaze and grain and none of those other settings. So I'm going to go ahead and only check remove chromatic aberration, because that actually works pretty decently in Lightroom. And then also I am going to apply default sharpening. Now 25:1:25 is a pretty weak setting for me, so I want to have my starting point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my detail to 100, set the radius to 0.5, and then the amount varies by camera, but I'm just going to pick something like 40, which typically works pretty well. Now, if I need to add sharpening after that, I can obviously come here and work on it further, but I'm not going to touch anything else. I'm definitely not touching the masking area here because that's highly dependent on the image that I'm working with. I'm not going to touch anything in split toning and definitely not anything in HSL. So tone curve is another part that I don't touch because that really depends on the image. However, here in this area, there are a couple of things I might want to change. And specifically, I'm not going to touch anything with exposure or contrast simply because, again, it varies by every image. But highlights is something I might want to actually work with. And the reason why is because you will find yourself tweaking that anyway. And specifically for landscapes, for example, if I import an image, why not have a highlight setting already tuned to a specific setting? Because then I can look at the grid view and already see the potential for editing. So in this case, I'm going to just start with something like -50. And as you can see, they already did a pretty good job there. Again, it gives me an ability to kind of see the potential for editing of the image. I'm not going to touch other areas here, but the shadows is another one that I might want to just tweak, and typically something like 30 will give a nice boost to the image. So aside from those two, I'm not going to touch the whites, blacks, and definitely not anything in the presence. So if I'm satisfied with this and I say, okay, now what I can do is I can create my import preset, and that's exactly what I'm going to do next. And as you can see, I already had an import preset before, but I'm going to create a brand new one just for this exercise here. So I'm going to call it import preset. Now what I'm going to do is, again, it's going to save it into the user presets by default, and then these are all the things that I want applied. Now, obviously, there's nothing to worry about in terms of things that are selected in color and other corrections here. They really don't matter in this case, but I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck them and leave the ones that I actually tweaked. So I did work on sharpening. So let's go ahead and uncheck that, the color, split toning, noise reduction, and I had the process version calibration on the bottom, which is going to default to 2012, but calibration is something that I did work on, and I'm not going to touch exposure and contrast, but highlights and shadows are fine. So in this case, I have specific things that I worked on this image. Actually, you know what? I did forget one thing, which is chromatic aberration. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. So the important thing is now I have very selective things that I'm going to apply to images. So those are the things that I changed in the image. Now let's go ahead and create that import preset. Now, as soon as I do that, I have an import preset here. And the nice thing about it is that now if I have images to import, say I came back from a shoot and I have images to import, I can just click import photos and video, and say I had some images to import from my computer or a memory card. All I have to do is come down to this field here on the right side that says apply during import, and if I click here and go to user presets, now I have my new import preset. And the moment I pick that, if I start now importing images, as soon as they're imported, all the images are going to have these settings that I modified in this image. So this is something that is going to save you quite a bit of time, because if you find yourself making the same adjustments to the images over and over again, or you want to have a good starting point like I have here, maybe you set your defaults, and then as soon as the images are imported, you just have a good point to start with. Now, there's one more thing here. As I said before, this particular preset that I created has the profile for camera standard, and that only works for my Nikon cameras, because these things are going to change depending on the camera. If I were shooting with something like a Fuji and it's going to have something like Provia standard or other presets, that profile is not going to carry over. So if you do shoot with multiple cameras and you want to have that profile, you might want to name it accordingly. For Nikon, maybe have Nikon import, and then if you shoot with Fuji, maybe Fuji import, so that when you import specific images from a specific camera, you just apply the desired import preset. Based on everything you have seen, you can tell that Lightroom is a very capable tool. And while we went into extensive detail covering the develop and library modules, as well as all these other tools within Lightroom, there are a few areas that we haven't touched. For example, preferences, catalogs, and a few other things within Lightroom. And the reason why we didn't do that is simple. Our goal was to teach you how to navigate through Lightroom and use its powerful editing capabilities. Now, if you're a first-time Lightroom user, I hope by now you're very comfortable with using Lightroom, and if you're an advanced user, maybe you discovered a thing or two that you could use in the future.